If you're a musician and you are applying for the O1 visa, here are some special tips just for you. Hi everyone, my name is Marcus E. and I'm an immigration attorney. Today we're going to be talking about special tips for musicians who are interested in applying for the O1 visa. So this isn't a general overview of what the O1 visa is like. If you want a video about that, please check out the link down below. Today is really about focusing down on the industry of music and what it means for a musician to be applying for an O1 visa. So let's get started. Okay, so just to let you know, I call them tips, but they're really not tips. I mean, I guess you'll get some tips out of this. It's just that it's really more like my pet peeves and observations and best practices for musicians who are interested in applying for the O1. So the first thing I want to talk about is really teaching. So musicians teach, right? You need to make money, so usually you take on a bunch of students and just things like that. I guess the downside for me when it comes to teaching gigs is that normally it's really difficult for a musician to fit into the lead starring role in productions that are distinguished category. I think teaching could be a possible entryway into the criteria when it comes to like lead critical role for organizations that are distinguished. So here's why. If you're teaching a student, normally that's not considered a production. So it's going to be really difficult for you to be able to fit into the whole like productions are distinguished in the first place because it's a student and there's no show, and you just really aren't going to be able to have documentation that proves that this your student is like distinguished or something like that. And even if your student is distinguished and goes on like to Carnegie Hall or like wins a bunch of awards or something like that, it doesn't show that the thing itself is a production. However, I do feel that it could help you fit into the critical role for organizations category. So if you think about it, if you work for, let's say, a school or something like that, and let's say you work for Juilliard, right? Juilliard's a really distinguished school, and if Juilliard is willing to write you a letter recommendation explaining why your work is super critical to the organization, then that is a possible entryway into that criteria. Just be careful in terms of like the organization. So like if we're talking about a school that is maybe not so well known, or maybe if it's even like your own personal practice and there's like no real school, then that's going to be a problem. But I think if it's something like if you work for Juilliard and you bring really specific skills to the table, like for example, like if you are a classical voice teacher that focuses on only on like Italian repertoire and nobody else does this at the school and only you do this, then I would say that yes, this is something that is super helpful and could help you fit into the critical role for organizations that are distinguished, but it's still not going to help you with the lead role for productions that are distinguished category. Tip number 2, and this has to do with gig documentation. So you do gigs, you do concerts, you do recitals, whatever. At the end of the day, you need to be able to document that the production is considered distinguished. Whatever you're doing needs to be distinguished. And the way you show whether production is distinguished is through documentation. For example, immigration is really looking for things like previews, press releases, newspaper articles, advertisements, contract endorsements, that sort of thing. Think about it this way. When we are sending an application to immigration, it's just going to be a giant stack of papers. They're not going to be looking at videos. I mean, they could Google you if they wanted to, but most of the time they're not. You're just going to send them a giant stack of paper. So you need to have documentation that shows that your gig is like distinguished. And I think a lot of problems that some of my clients have is that sometimes they do a gig and then there's no documentation that it ever happened. There's no preview, there's no press release, there's no program, there's nothing. And what I tell them is that if you don't have documentation that the thing existed, it's as if the thing never existed. So going forward, if you are going to gig, make sure that there is advertisements. Make sure you publicize it. Make sure you create a press release. Make sure you get these things out there and save them. Save them so that you can send them out to immigration when it is time. And like I said, if you don't have documentation, it's as if the thing never existed. All right, topic number 3. Let's talk about music library work. So some musicians will make a living by working for like a music library. They will, create little tunes or things that a music library will ultimately pay them for. Okay, Problem with that is that same thing, it's not a production, right? You might have created these works, but it's really difficult to show that this is actually a production or that the production is distinguished because you're not going to have the documentation for that. But just like the whole teaching thing, maybe you could show that you played a critical role for this music library organization. So if the music library has been around, it's super distinguished, there's lots of documentation about it, yes, you can show that the organization is distinguished. The next thing you need to do is show that you played a critical role for this music library. So for example, like if your music is, I don't know, really specific, like if you create like Irish jingles or something like that, and you're the only person who knows Irish music inside out, then possibly you can get the letter of recommendation from the music library and they can explain why your work is critical to their organization, right? Presumably because you have such a niche skill set that without you, they wouldn't be able to like build out a certain part of the music library. But also don't forget two parts to that criteria. Your work needs to be critical to the organization and the organization needs to be distinguished. So you need to make sure that whatever organization it is, there is documentation that shows that this organization is distinguished. So don't just give them like the website bio or something like that. Go dig a little bit deeper. Like, how long have they been around for? What kind of clients do they have? Do they have any kind of press coverage? All of this is great documentation for you to help you fit into that criteria. Number 4, let's talk about film work. And I guess the tip here is sometimes you should put it in and sometimes you shouldn't. Anyway, let's unpack this a little bit. So there are two kinds of like O1 visas, right? There are two kinds of O1B visas. One is for general arts and the other is for motion picture and television. The difference is that the motion picture and television one, there's a higher scrutiny, meaning that it's harder to get that visa unless you are like really, really distinguished. The standard for motion picture and television is extraordinary achievement, and for arts, you just need to show extraordinary ability. So you can see like it's slightly higher. When it comes to film work, I guess it really depends on what kind of musician you are. If you're a composer that primarily like does film scoring, then I'm sorry, you have no choice. You're stuck in the film category, whether you like it or not. So all of the criteria when it comes to like the film category applies to you. If you are, let's say, working in live performance, right? You're in a band or something like that. You're in an orchestra. Then that's where it gets a little bit simpler and easier for you because like the standard is lower. I guess the big problem is really when it comes to people who sort of like dabble or like dip their toe into like the film industry, right? So like they're primarily musicians that perform live, but they had like 1 or 2 film scores or something like that. And people ask me, hey, can I put that in? And I guess the risk is that once you put like a film project in, immigration has the option to sort of like shove you into the film category, whether you like it or not. So even if, let's say, most of your work is live performance based, you put in one film category thing, they shove you into the film category, and now you have a higher standard that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to need to get a second advisory opinion, that sort of thing. So I would say like if you're the kind of person that is sort of dipping your toe into the film thing and it's not really a big part of what you do, in general, I would prefer my clients not include the film stuff so that they avoid immigration deciding that they are suddenly in the film category or something like that. And when it comes to immigration, it's very hit or miss. I've definitely seen people who have snuck in 1 or 2 film credits and immigration was fine with it. I've seen cases where literally the person put in like 1 short film thing that they did and suddenly, oh my God, you're in the film category, and all kinds of requests for evidence are coming their way. So I think if you can avoid it, avoid it. If you can't, and primarily what you do is a film composer, then accept that that is the category in, and just make sure that you're able to fulfill the requirements of like the higher film standard if necessary. Let's talk about EPs. So EPs are great. I like them. I guess the downside or the problem I see most commonly is that people create an EP, they put it on Spotify, and that's it. And they come to me and like, is that distinguished? And my answer is no, that's not distinguished. So like an EP can be distinguished, if there are many streams and there are many concerts, maybe the song is used in a movie and just things like that. At the end of the day, it's really about you documenting that your EP is considered distinguished. I would say that if you have an EP, then you sort of like have content, and that's always great because content means that you can now go out there, put your things on the internet. You can go out there, you can gig. But at the end of the day, you cannot just create an EP, put it on YouTube, and call it a day. That is not enough. That is not distinguished. You need to go further. You need to show that your EP has legs. You need to show that, you know, many people have downloaded it. You need to show that you have done many concerts. Maybe you even like created a little tour or something like that. And then that also really helps that, you know, the production is distinguished. So I think like EPs are a great start, but don't just create a thing, dump it on the internet, and come to me and like, hey, is that good enough? The answer is no, it's not good enough. And the last thing really has to do with like social media. So like I just talked about like, you know, Spotify streams and things like that. So, okay, so here's the thing. Immigration is, I don't know, old and dated. So they don't really trust social media, and you know who really does anyway, because you know you can buy views, you can buy followers and all that kind of thing. Yes, I think YouTube views are a great part of the case. I think if you have them, that's one part of the case, but you can't just call it a day and like, well, I got 3 million, you know, views on my video, so therefore it's distinguished. No, that's not good enough. So I think it's really a combination of different things. So it's sort of like views plus like streams plus like press plus like concerts. So I think it's not just by themselves. So okay, so think of a social media as like only one part of it. If you only have the social media down, that's not going to be considered distinguished, and it's really risky to just sort of hang your hat on that part. So I would say like you want to give other reasons why your project is distinguished, right? So it's not just the views, it's also like we performed at all these different concerts at these different distinguished venues. Maybe there was a major newspaper write-up about, you know, like your project or something like that. Maybe other people involved in the project are considered distinguished. You want to take all of this information and put it together. At the end of the day, it's not about, you know, one particular thing that's going to make a thing distinguished or not. It's really multiple reasons, and you want to give them multiple reasons why, because even if let's say they knock out like one reason, you have 5 other reasons why your project's considered distinguished. So I would say like the more reasons you can come up with as to like why your project is considered distinguished, in addition to like your social media views and streams and all that kind of thing, that would be best. All right, and that is it for my, I guess, tips, ranting, babbling on about the music industry and the O1 visa. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I have tons of other videos when it comes to like the O1 visa, and I'll see you soon. Bye!